The moment my ex-husband saw my children, the color drained from his face. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered across the polished marble floor. The music stopped. The guests turned. And for the first time in 10 years, Daniel looked afraid. Not angry. Not arrogant. Afraid. I stood at the entrance of the wedding hall holding the hands of my two children. A boy on my left. A girl on my right. Both dressed beautifully. Both smiling. And both carrying a secret that Daniel never expected to walk through those doors. A secret that would destroy the perfect life he had spent years building. But to understand why that moment mattered, you need to understand what happened 10 years earlier. My name is Elizabeth. And this is the story of how the man who broke my heart invited me to his wedding to humiliate me, only to discover that fate had prepared something far more humiliating for him. The invitation arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning. I almost threw it away. The envelope was expensive. Cream-colored. Gold lettering. The kind of invitation designed to impress people. The moment I saw the sender's name, my stomach tightened. Daniel Thompson. My ex-husband. The man who had once promised to love me forever. The man who left me when I needed him most. For several seconds I simply stared at the envelope. 10 years. 10 years without hearing his voice. 10 years without seeing his face. And now this. My fingers trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside was a wedding invitation. Daniel Thompson and Sophia Reynolds request the honor of your presence. I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because sometimes pain returns in such an absurd way that laughter becomes the only possible reaction. He was getting married. Again. Good for him. I was about to toss the invitation into the trash when a small folded note slipped out. My smile disappeared. I unfolded it. The message was handwritten. Elizabeth, it has been a long time. I know our history wasn't perfect, but life moves on. I would be honored if you attended my wedding. It would mean a lot to show everyone that there are no hard feelings between us. Hope to see you there. Daniel, I read it twice. Then 3 times. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't kindness. This wasn't forgiveness. This wasn't closure. This was Daniel being Daniel. Because Daniel never did anything without an audience. He wanted me there. Not as a guest. As a trophy. Proof that he had won. Proof that his life was perfect. Proof that he had moved on while I was just a chapter in his story. The old Elizabeth would have cried. The old Elizabeth would have felt humiliated. The old Elizabeth would have spent weeks wondering why she wasn't enough. But the old Elizabeth no longer existed. My daughter walked into the kitchen. Mom. I quickly hid the invitation. She smiled. At 10 years old, Emma somehow managed to light up every room she entered. Behind her came her twin brother, Ethan. What's for breakfast? He asked. I looked at them. My children. My entire world. And suddenly Daniel's invitation seemed insignificant. Because while he spent 10 years chasing status and appearances, I spent 10 years building something real. Nothing important, I said. Emma tilted her head. Then why do you look upset? Children notice everything. I smiled. I'm not upset. That was mostly true. I was curious. Very curious. Because after all these years, why now? Why invite me? Why risk reopening old wounds? The answer arrived 3 days later. My phone rang. I didn't recognize the number. When I answered, I froze. Hello, Elizabeth. Daniel. His voice was exactly the same. Smooth. Confident. Carefully practiced. Daniel. A pause. Wow, he said. It's really been a while. What do you want? He chuckled. Straight to the point. Classic Daniel. I wanted to make sure you received the invitation. I did. And what? Will you come? There it was. The real question. Not whether I received it. Whether I would show up. Whether I would stand among hundreds of guests while he celebrated his perfect new life. I haven't decided. Another pause. Then he said something that told me everything. I think people would love to see how well you've been doing. People. Not me. Not us. People. An audience. Exactly as I suspected. I smiled despite myself. Daniel hadn't changed at all. Why is it so important that I attend? His answer came too quickly. It isn't. Which meant it absolutely was. For the next several minutes he talked about the wedding, the venue, the guest list, the business partners, the luxury details. Everything sounded less like a celebration and more like a performance. When the call ended, I sat quietly for a long time. Then Emma entered the room. Mom. I looked up. What is it? She pointed toward the invitation on the table. Who's getting married? I stared at the gold lettering. Then a strange idea formed in my mind. A dangerous idea. Maybe I should attend. Not because Daniel wanted me there. Not because I needed closure. But because I was tired of running from the past. Maybe it was time for Daniel to see what my life actually looked like. Maybe it was time for him to meet the two people who changed everything. The two people he knew nothing about. The two children whose existence would turn his perfect wedding day into something unforgettable. I looked at Emma, then Ethan, then back at the invitation. And for the first time since it arrived, I smiled. Kids, I said softly, how would you feel about attending a wedding? Before Daniel became the man standing at the altar. Before he became the man who invited me to his wedding as some twisted victory lap. He was the man I believed I would spend the rest of my life with. We met when I was 23. I was working at a small publishing company. Daniel was a young sales executive with a smile that seemed capable of convincing anyone of anything. Including me. Especially me. First, everything felt magical. Daniel had a way of making people feel special. When he spoke to you, it felt like you were the only person in the room. When he complimented you, you believed every word. When he promised something, you never imagined he might not keep it. For the first year, our relationship felt like something from a movie. Flowers, weekend trips, late-night conversations, plans for the future. I thought I had found my soulmate. Everyone loved him. My parents adored him. My friends admired him. Even strangers seemed drawn to him. Daniel could walk into a room and own it within minutes. Looking back now, I realize something important. People often mistake confidence for character. I certainly did. 2 years later, we got married. It wasn't an extravagant wedding. We couldn't afford one. But it was beautiful. At least I thought it was. I remember standing at the altar looking into Daniel's eyes. I remember believing every promise we made. For better or worse. For richer or poorer. In sickness and in health. The irony of those words would haunt me years later. The first few years of marriage were good. Not perfect, but good. We rented a small apartment. We worked hard. We dreamed big. We laughed often. And whenever life became difficult, I believed we were facing it together. I didn't realize I was the only one fighting for that future. Daniel had different dreams. Dreams he rarely shared. Dreams that slowly began changing him. As his career advanced, something shifted. At first it was subtle. New friends. New habits. New priorities. Then came the expensive watches. The luxury restaurants. The obsession with appearances. Success became more important than happiness. Status became more important than relationships. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being his partner. I became part of his image. Something to display. Something to enhance his reputation. Something useful. But not something valuable. One evening, I noticed it clearly for the first time. We were attending a corporate event. Daniel spent the entire night introducing me to people. But every introduction sounded the same. This is my wife, Elizabeth. Nothing unusual about that. Except he never asked me questions, never included me in conversations, never cared what I thought. I was an accessory, a carefully dressed accessory. On the drive home, I finally spoke up. Do you even realize what you did tonight? He looked confused. What do you mean? You introduced me to 20 people. So, you never actually talked to me. Daniel laughed. A dismissive laugh. You're overthinking it. That became his favorite phrase. You're overthinking it. Whenever I felt ignored, whenever I felt hurt, whenever I expressed concerns, you're overthinking it. Eventually I stopped bringing things up. Not because the problems disappeared, because I got tired of being told they weren't real. Years passed. The distance between us grew. But I kept believing things would improve. I kept believing the man I fell in love with was still there somewhere. I was wrong. The day my marriage truly ended wasn't the day we signed divorce papers. It wasn't even the day Daniel left. It happened months earlier, the moment I needed him most, and discovered he wasn't there. I had been feeling exhausted for weeks. First I blamed work, then stress, then lack of sleep. But the fatigue became impossible to ignore. My doctor ordered tests. I wasn't worried. I expected something minor. A vitamin deficiency. Maybe exhaustion. Nothing serious. I went to the appointment alone. Daniel was busy with work. Again, I remember sitting across from the doctor. I remember the expression on her face before she spoke. That's when fear appeared. The kind of fear that arrives before words. The kind that changes your life. The diagnosis wasn't fatal, but it was serious enough to require treatment. Serious enough to scare me. Serious enough that I didn't want to face it alone. As soon as I left the office, I called Daniel. No answer. I called again. No answer. I sent a message. Daniel, please call me. It's important. Hours passed. Nothing. By evening, he finally responded. Busy. Can it wait? I stared at the message. Can it wait? The words felt unreal. I called him immediately. This time he answered. What happened? He asked. I explained everything. The tests. The diagnosis. The treatment. The fear. I expected concern. Support. Compassion. Instead there was silence. Then he sighed. Not because he was worried. Because he was annoyed. That's not great timing. I blinked. What? I've got a major project right now. For several seconds I couldn't speak. I genuinely thought I had misunderstood. Daniel, I'm scared. Another pause. Then he said something I will never forget. Elizabeth, everybody has problems. Everybody has problems. To this day, I can still hear those words. Not because they were cruel, because they revealed exactly who he was. The mask slipped. The performance ended. And I finally saw the truth. When life was easy, Daniel loved being a husband. When life became difficult, he viewed me as an inconvenience. The months that followed were the loneliest of my life. Doctor appointments. Treatments. Recovery. Most of it happened without him. Physically, he was present sometimes. Emotionally, he had already left. Our conversations became shorter, colder, more distant, until one night he sat across from me at the kitchen table, the same table where we once planned our future, and he said the words I never expected to hear. I think we want different things. The sentence sounded rehearsed, like something he had practiced. What are you talking about? Daniel avoided eye contact. I don't think this marriage is working anymore. My heart sank. Not because I was surprised. Because I finally understood where everything had been heading. Is there someone else? His silence answered before his mouth did. I closed my eyes. There it was. The final piece. The missing truth. There was someone else. A younger woman. A newer woman. Someone who represented excitement instead of responsibility. Someone who hadn't seen his flaws yet. Someone who still believed his promises, the same way I once had. "I see," I whispered. Daniel looked relieved. Relieved. As if ending our marriage was solving a problem, not breaking a person's heart. "I never wanted to hurt you." Another lie. People always say that. As though intention matters more than actions. As though betrayal becomes kinder if delivered politely. I stood from the table. Suddenly exhausted. Suddenly older. Suddenly aware that the life I imagined was over. What I didn't know then, what Daniel didn't know either, was that fate still had one final surprise waiting. A surprise growing quietly inside me. A surprise neither of us had discovered yet. And when that secret finally came to light, everything would change. Not immediately. Not dramatically. But in ways Daniel could never have imagined. Because while he was preparing to walk away from our marriage, life was preparing to hand me the greatest gift I would ever receive. And 10 years later, that gift would walk beside me into his wedding and turn his world upside down. The divorce was finalized 3 months later. No dramatic courtroom battle. No screaming arguments. No last-minute reconciliation. Just signatures, paperwork, and the quiet death of a life I once thought would last forever. I remember leaving the courthouse with a strange feeling. Not sadness. Not anger. Emptiness. As if someone had erased an entire chapter of my life and left behind blank pages. Daniel walked away without looking back. I watched him disappear into a black luxury car. A car we could never have afforded when we were married. A symbol of everything he had chosen over us. Then I turned around and started walking in the opposite direction. I didn't know it then, but that was the last time I would see him for nearly 10 years. Or so I thought. A few weeks later, something strange happened. I started feeling tired again. Not normal tired. Different. First, I blamed stress. After everything that had happened, exhaustion seemed reasonable. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Some mornings I woke up nauseous. Certain foods suddenly smelled unbearable. Coffee, my favorite thing in the world, made me feel sick. That should have been the clue. But my mind never went there. Not once. Until my best friend Rachel looked at me over lunch and said, "Elizabeth, what? Have you taken a pregnancy test?" I laughed. Actually laughed. The idea seemed ridiculous. Then I stopped laughing. Because suddenly it didn't seem ridiculous at all. An hour later I was standing in my bathroom staring at a small plastic stick. My hands were shaking. My heart was racing. And my entire future was about to change. I looked down. 2 lines. Positive. For several seconds I couldn't breathe. Pregnant. I was pregnant. The room felt smaller. The silence felt louder. Pregnant. Not someday. Not eventually. Now. I sank onto the bathroom floor. Tears filled my eyes. Not because I was unhappy. Because I was terrified. I was divorced. Alone. Recovering emotionally. Trying to rebuild my life. And now I was going to be a mother. Questions attacked my mind from every direction. How would I afford this? Could I do it alone? Should I tell Daniel? Would he even care? The next morning I scheduled a doctor's appointment. I needed confirmation. I needed certainty. I needed someone to tell me my life wasn't spinning completely out of control. Instead, the appointment delivered an even bigger surprise. The doctor smiled while reviewing the scan. "Well, Elizabeth." I swallowed nervously. "What is it?" Her smile widened. "It looks like you're having twins." Twins.
Ist daher.
Certain I had heard wrong. Twins. She nodded. 2 healthy babies. 2 babies. Not 1. 2. The shock was so overwhelming that I started laughing. Then crying. Then laughing again. The doctor handed me tissues. I probably looked completely insane. But in that moment my entire world changed. Not because my problems disappeared. Because suddenly I had something bigger than my fears. Something worth fighting for. For 3 days I debated whether to tell Daniel. Part of me wanted nothing to do with him. Part of me believed he deserved to know. Eventually responsibility won. I called him. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. And somehow managed to destroy the last pieces of respect I still had for him. When he answered, he sounded distracted. Busy. As always. Elizabeth. I need to tell you something. His tone changed slightly. What is it? I took a breath. I'm pregnant. Silence. Long silence. Then what? I'm pregnant. Another pause. Are you serious? Yes. The silence returned. I waited. Maybe for excitement. Maybe for concern. Maybe for some sign that he understood the significance of what I was saying. Instead he asked, how far along? I answered. More silence. Then I added, and it's twins. I will never forget his response. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was cold. Incredibly cold. Elizabeth. The way he said my name told me everything. Daniel. This complicates things. Complicates things. Not congratulations. Not are you okay? Not how are the babies. Complicates things. As if his children were a scheduling conflict. A business problem. A minor inconvenience. My heart broke in a completely different way that day. Not for myself. For the babies. Children who hadn't even been born yet. Children already being treated like obstacles. I thought you should know. Another pause. Then he said, are you sure they're mine? The words hit harder than any insult ever could. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. For a moment I actually wondered if I had called the wrong person. Because surely the man I once loved couldn't say something so cruel. Could he? Apparently he could. I ended the call shortly afterward. There was nothing left to discuss. Nothing left to save. Nothing left to hope for. That conversation taught me something important. I was truly alone. And strangely, that realization made me stronger. Because once you stop expecting someone to save you, you start learning how to save yourself. The twins arrived on a snowy December morning. Emma first. Then Ethan 3 minutes later. The moment I held them, everything changed. Every fear. Every heartbreak. Every disappointment. All of it became background noise. Because suddenly there were 2 tiny people looking at me as though I was their entire world. And in many ways I was. The first few years were difficult. Actually, difficult isn't the right word. They were brutal. Sleepless nights. Medical bills. Working multiple jobs. Constant exhaustion. There were days I cried in the shower because it was the only place nobody could see me. There were nights I stared at unpaid bills wondering how I would survive another month. But somehow we always did. One step at a time. One day at a time. One challenge at a time. The twins became my reason to keep moving forward. Emma was fearless. Even as a toddler she approached life like an adventure. She asked questions constantly. Why is the sky blue? Why do birds fly? Why do people lie? Especially that last one. Even at 5 years old, she somehow asked the hardest questions. Ethan was different. Quiet. Observant. Thoughtful. The kind of child who noticed details everyone else missed. Together they balanced each other perfectly. Watching them grow healed parts of me I didn't even know were broken. Years passed. Slowly life improved. I earned promotions. Built savings. Bought a small house. Nothing luxurious. Nothing flashy. But it was ours. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud. Not because life was perfect. Because we had survived. Then one ordinary afternoon, everything changed again. Emma was 9. Ethan was 9. I was cleaning old boxes in the attic. The twins were helping. Or at least pretending to help. Mostly they were making a mess. Suddenly Ethan found an old photo album. Mom. My stomach tightened immediately. I knew what was inside. Photos from my marriage. Photos I hadn't looked at in years. He opened it before I could stop him and froze. Emma looked over his shoulder. Then both children stared at the same photograph. A photograph of Daniel, my ex-husband, their father, a father they had never met. Neither child spoke for several seconds. Then Emma asked quietly, "Who is this?" The question I'd been dreading for years had finally arrived. I looked at the photograph, then at them, then back at the photograph, and something inside me realized it was time. Time to tell the truth. Not all of it, but enough. Enough for them to understand where they came from. Enough for them to know they were loved. Enough for them to know none of what happened was their fault. I sat down. The twins sat beside me. And together we opened a conversation that would eventually lead us to Daniel's wedding. A conversation that would set events in motion. Events none of us could possibly predict. Because while I was preparing to explain the past, Daniel was preparing for the biggest day of his life. A day he believed would celebrate his success. A day he believed would prove he had won. A day that would instead force him to confront the one thing he spent 10 years trying to ignore. His children. The wedding venue was exactly what I expected. Expensive. Elegant. Designed to impress. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling. Luxury cars lined the entrance. Guests in designer suits and dresses filled the hall. Everything about the event screamed one message. Look how successful Daniel Thompson has become. As I stepped out of the car, Emma squeezed my hand. Mom, are you nervous? I smiled. A little. Ethan adjusted his tie. You don't have to be. For a moment, I forgot they were only 10 years old. Sometimes children understand strength better than adults. We walked toward the entrance together. 3 people. 1 family. The family Daniel had chosen to abandon. The family he never bothered to know. The family he was about to meet. Inside the hall, conversations buzzed around us. No one recognized me at first. Then whispers started. People remembered. Not everyone, but enough. Isn't that Daniel's first wife? I think so. Wow, she actually came. Exactly what Daniel wanted. An audience.
Un spectacle.
A reminder that he had moved on. But fate had other plans. At the front of the hall stood Daniel. Perfect suit. Perfect smile. Perfect image. Beside him stood Sophia, his bride. Everything looked exactly the way he wanted. Then his eyes found me. The smile widened. For a second. Then he noticed Emma. Then Ethan. And everything changed. The smile vanished. The color drained from his face. His eyes widened. His entire body froze. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't curiosity. It was recognition. Because he didn't just see 2 children. He saw himself. Emma had his eyes. Ethan had his smile. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The champagne glass slipped from his hand. Crash. The sound echoed through the hall. Conversations stopped. Music stopped. Hundreds of eyes turned toward him. Daniel stood motionless, staring. The same way someone stares at a ghost. The same way someone stares at a mistake they thought had disappeared years ago. Sophia looked confused. Daniel. He didn't answer. His eyes never left the twins. Emma looked up at me. Mom. I squeezed her hand gently. It's okay. Daniel took a step forward. Then another. For the first time in 10 years, he looked completely vulnerable. Not powerful. Not confident. Not successful. Just a man confronting the consequences of his choices. When he finally reached us, his voice barely worked. Elizabeth. I nodded politely. Hello, Daniel. His eyes moved back to the children. Then back to me. Then back again. The truth was written all over his face. He knew. Without anyone saying a word. He knew. There. He couldn't finish the sentence. I didn't help him. For years I had carried responsibilities he ignored, truths he avoided, questions he never asked. Now he could face them himself. Sophia approached slowly, looking between all of us, looking at the children, looking at Daniel. And then she noticed it too. The resemblance. The undeniable resemblance. Her expression changed instantly. What is going on? No one answered. Because everyone already knew. The room was silent. The guests were silent. Even the musicians were silent. Finally Ethan stepped forward. His voice calm, steady, more mature than anyone expected. You are Daniel Thompson, right? Daniel nodded slowly. Ethan extended his hand. My name is Ethan. Then he pointed toward his sister. And that's Emma. A tear formed in Daniel's eye. The first genuine emotion I had seen from him in over a decade. Not because he was embarrassed. Because reality had finally caught up with him. Years of success. Years of status. Years of pretending. And yet the most important part of his life had been missing. Standing right in front of him. Sophia turned toward him. You have children. The question hit harder than any accusation. Because there was only one answer. Yes. The room exploded with whispers. But I wasn't listening. I was watching Daniel. Watching the man who once believed success could replace responsibility. Watching the man who spent years building an image. Only to realize images don't hug you when you're lonely. Images don't call you dad. Images don't become family. Children do. And he had missed 10 years. 10 years he could never get back. A few minutes later Sophia quietly walked away. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just disappointed. The way people look when they discover someone isn't who they claim to be. The wedding never happened. Guests slowly left. Decorations remained untouched. The expensive venue remained full of empty chairs. And Daniel remained standing alone. For the first time in his life, there was no audience left to impress. Only truth. Hours later, after most people had gone home, Daniel approached me outside. The sun was beginning to set. The twins were nearby, laughing, talking, being children. Daniel watched them for a long time. Then he spoke. I spent years thinking I had one. I said nothing, because sometimes silence says more than words. He laughed bitterly. But looking at them, his voice cracked. I realized I lost everything that actually mattered. For a moment I saw the man I married. Not the arrogant businessman. Not the performer. Just a flawed human being. A human being carrying enormous regret. I'm sorry, Elizabeth. The words came 10 years too late. But they were real. For the first time they were real. I nodded. Not because everything was forgiven. Not because the past disappeared. But because carrying anger forever is another kind of prison. Daniel looked at the twins again. Do they know? Yes. His eyes filled with tears. Do they hate me? I looked toward Emma and Ethan. Then back at him. No. His shoulders shook slightly. Why not? Because children often possess wisdom adults lack. They don't know you well enough to hate you. The sentence broke him. Because it was true. He wasn't their father. Not really. A father is more than biology. A father is presence, sacrifice, love, time, things he never gave. As the sun disappeared below the horizon, Daniel quietly sat on a nearby bench, watching the children, watching the life he missed, watching the consequences of choices he could never undo. And for the first time he understood something important. Success is not measured by wealth, or status, or expensive weddings. Success is measured by the people who stand beside you when everything else disappears. I looked at Emma and Ethan. My greatest blessings. My greatest victories. The children who carried me through my darkest years. The children who taught me that endings can become beginnings. Then Emma ran toward me. Ethan followed. Both wrapped their arms around me. And in that moment I realized something Daniel never understood. I had never lost. Not when he left. Not when I struggled. Not when I cried myself to sleep wondering how I would survive. Because every painful step led me here. To this moment. To this family. To this love. Daniel invited me to his wedding to humiliate me. Instead, he witnessed something far more powerful. He saw the life I built without him. And he discovered that the woman he once underestimated had already won. Not through revenge. Not through wealth. Not through humiliation. But through love. And sometimes, that is the greatest victory of all. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments below. Do you think Daniel deserved a second chance? Or was it already too late? Your thoughts might inspire someone going through a difficult chapter in their own life. And remember, sometimes the people who walk away think they've won. But true success isn't measured by money, status, or appearances. It's measured by the love you build, the lives you touch, and the family that stands beside you when everything else falls apart. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next emotional and inspiring story. We share powerful stories of love, betrayal, karma, second chances, and life-changing moments every week. Thank you for watching until the end. Stay kind, stay strong, and we'll see you in the next story.